Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and David Moore. Fellas, how we doing this fine spring morning?
Wonderful.
It's a beautiful day, isn't it?
It is.
Did it rain on everybody last night a little bit?
Yeah, and I did not hear it. I get up this morning and like everything is totally soaked. It looked like it was a pretty good rain.
Yeah, I think it was. All the cushions out here on the deck soaked. That's always good.
You can't sit out on the deck by the pool and just kind of get ready for the draft tomorrow. What?
Nice that you guys have decks and pools.
The place is horrible.
Yeah, I have a deck, but not a pool. I don't. It's what a pool is. One of those things. I don't want a pool. I want a friend with a pool. That's what I want. I don't want to have to take care of it.
That is the preferred option. Let me tell you. The theory of it sounds very nice, and it looks good, and it actually cools the backyard a little bit. A couple of degrees. You get that little breeze but you're correct. Door number 2, a friend with a pool. You can use it anytime is the preferred option.
Exactly.
When we want to go in the water, we just
the Trinity
fire hydrant.
You're right by the Trinity, right?
Yeah. You jump in the Trinity. There you go. How about that? You wouldn't come back out, but you could jump in.
Play with those little alligator gars.
It's a beautiful thing. The city is finally advancing that whole thing. We should have a podcast about that they're finally going to do something about that plan. When was that?
It's going to be whitewater rafting there, right?
Kayaking,
whitewater rafting.
We were going to have all kinds of stuff.
Actually, by my house is where they're going to have the beach.
Oh, nice. Okay. Nice. That is really good. Yeah.
So you're going to have a beachfront view?
Yeah. Hey, I just want to set the scene here for everybody real quickly, because unfortunately this isn't on video and people don't get to see it.
I believe fortunately is not on video for listeners and would-be viewers, I think is the.
So I just want everybody to know that Kevin currently is basically impersonating my mother and sitting alone in the dark.
It's a Carly Simon song, I think.
Well, I'm okay. I'll just sit here in the dark. Why are you in the dark?
I have a lamp right behind my head. If I turn the lamp on, it looks like I'm angelic. I don't think you guys.
Don't worry. Nobody will think you're angelic.
No, that's not where my mind would go. No,
it's just way too. That's just people will think, oh my gosh, he is a god. So anyway, I don't want that.
Also, before we get into all of our subjects today, because this is so riveting, I just want to say to everybody that Kevin has also tamped this joke down since we started, because originally it makes me look like God, and my response was, well, you do have a God complex anyway.
Yeah. Well, and that wasn't a good joke, so that's why we didn't go there. All right, let's go somewhere else where there were a few jokes there yesterday in the Cowboys pre-draft.
There was jocularity.
Presser. Yeah, there's some jocularity. That's exactly right. No, they had some fun there. For people who don't know what that looks like out of the Star, where they had the interview room, it's all glass on one side, and that glass is on the side of the lobby. They're very expansive lobby, as a matter of fact. So you see people coming and going. And one of the people we saw going was Stephon Gilmore, which was really interesting because, the Cowboys kind of have a need for a cornerback. And I think he's still a pretty good cornerback. And so everybody kind of waved and laughed. And Stephen Jones said that, some people just kind of come in to drop in to say hello, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So I guess, David, I should ask, does it mean anything that Gilmore was there? Did he leave some underwear there the last time he played for the Cowboys, or what was the deal?
He misplaced something in his locker from a year ago and came out. I was told there was like no imminent signing, and he was there for a reason other than football. And I will say players come through there from time to time that, for different reasons. There are different business ventures located in that building as well. So it could be one of that. But I would think where they are in terms of the cornerback position, the level he still played. I thought he still played at a very high level when he was here a year ago, and then he left for Minnesota, and I thought he played very well there.
Sure.
He's not the player he was when he was Defensive Player in the Year back when he was in New England, not all that long ago. But he's still, in my mind, when you look at corners in this league, he's still clearly in the top half, and that gives him value even at his age. My
Well, it's not
belief
just
is
this.
this was a stop by. Hey, I love I love you guys. I love this area. If you don't upgrade the position in the draft the way you hoped, I'll be open to coming back. But nothing imminent there. I think let's see how this week unfolds. If the Cowboys do take a corner, especially in the first 2 days, that you would think would be part of the rotation, and then go from there. But that is certainly an area of need. But I think Gilmore at this stage, whether the Cowboys or any team, it's just letting them know, hey, if the draft doesn't work out the way you hope or you want it at this position, I'm ready to go. I still want to play.
David, I got to tell you, I don't really understand some of these things that some of the people have not been signed, like a Calais Campbell, who was really good last year, and probably would be amenable to a 1-year deal, and yet he sits. Gilmore, who's been really good and a really good guy in the locker. Both of these guys, Campbell and Gilmore, really good locker room guys with a lot of experience, and players look up to them. Those things seem like no-brainers to me. If I could sign a guy to a 1-year deal, if it's not too, onerous, and I'm sure that it wouldn't be, what's the harm in doing that? Especially when, Deron Bland has got a couple of years under his belt, of course, but Trayvon Diggs has as well. But they're still fairly young guys, and
Well,
if
they're
they
young,
draft
and with
somebody, they'll be
Trayvon
even
with his
younger.
injuries, 2 major injuries in 2 seasons, in my mind, a big question of where he'll be as far as the performance level early in the season. And you acquired, Elam from Buffalo, who is a first-round pick that Buffalo is ready to move on from already. So there's some question there about his level of performance. So, no, I agree with you completely. But I think what happens in guys like, especially with Gilmore and Campbell, that have proven track records in this league and still have something left in the tank, once they don't make money in that first wave of free agency, it's really in their best interest to wait until after the draft, because there are teams in this draft that have pinpointed upgrading the defensive line and corner. Really, every team is in that position to some extent around the league. But now you see, and it's like, okay, the draft is done. These 4 teams need a corner. They're all interested. Which one do I want to go to? And I can play them off the other. So really, from a leverage standpoint, on these proven veterans who are really just hired guns and are looking for a 1-year deal of guaranteed money, really, if they don't sign in that first wave of free agency, their best leverage, I think, oftentimes is to wait until after the draft. And I say that these are only the guys at the top of their positions, right? If you're a notch below Campbell or Gilmore and you're not signed by now, you're just going to have to take whatever. But I think the Clay Campbells and the Stephon Gilmores can go be a little more discerning next week and go, okay, this situation's good for me. I'd like to go here, but this other team in your division is offering me $2 more million guaranteed a year. Can you do anything about it? And so I do think they have some leverage that other players don't at this stage.
So let me ask you this, David. As we were talking to the group there at the Star yesterday, Monday or Tuesday,
Tuesday,
actually,
yeah.
when of course, Brian Schottenheimer, Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, and Will McClay, the question came up, or at least I asked the question. Doesn't it make it easier this year to draft the best player available when just about any player you drafted would fit a need on this team?
Or as Jerry said when he parried with you, are you saying we have a lot of needs?
Yeah.
And then when you said yes,
exactly
he said, okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. I thought it was
But
pretty
no,
good from
you're
Jerry.
right.
I
I think there
appreciated
are.
that.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about targeting guys and who would be best, and those are all legitimate arguments. But if the Cowboys come out of the first round tomorrow night with a wide receiver, a running back, a corner, or a defensive lineman, I think the fan base would be fine with any of those, right?
Yeah, I would.
You know, some would
I
throw
think
Did you
offensive
just
line in
basically
there. I
run
would
through all the
not.
positions on the field?
Well, that's
yeah,
most. It's
pretty
not offensive lines, not quarterbacks, not tight end, not
yeah,
linebacker. But
yeah.
no, you're right. And see, I think some people would throw offensive line in that conversation as well. I don't know that I would with where they are and who would be there in the first round. But I think you're looking at any of four positions. If you come away with a player in any of those four positions, you're saying, okay, we got better. This makes sense. And a lot of times that's not the case for a team. There's a crying need at one or two positions. And if you don't get one or the other, you're kind of going, well, how good is the player going to be that you're going to get there in the second or third to help you? So yeah, I think they can legitimately upgrade their team by taking, a player in any of those four.
I think you could even make a case if Jalen Walker of Georgia, he's not going to fall to 12, but if he did, why you'd have to consider him.
Oh,
And
sure.
he's pretty much a pass rusher. So I think there's a lot of things they can do. But let me ask you this, David,
Kevin, what was that? I didn't hear exactly what you said there.
about he likes to emphasize any Georgia players.
I know.
With Jalen Walker, if he were to fall to
transparent.
the Cowboys at 12, I think you'd have to consider him. I mean, he's a specimen. I mean, that would give you a
Well, I
lot
don't
of.
think you'll consider him. I think you'll take him.
Well, I think you're right. Absolutely,
Because the
that's the
talent
kind of
level
player.
is just
That's because of the talent level, and that's one of the things that Dan Quinn made clear, right? You cannot have enough pass rushers,
Yeah.
and if you send them in waves, and that's exactly what Georgia did, right? Georgia played their guys that way. Michael Williams was another one that didn't play all that much, but he's considered a first round talent as well. And who
Eberflus is
knows
a
what
send him in waves guy as well. He likes
is
to.
he?
Yeah.
That's interesting to know. So, but
Well,
my point.
yeah, I mean, that was my question: is what if Williams is still there?
No, I don't think that Williams is as good as Walker. I think Walker is I think he's a more refined player now, at least, and I think he's probably a little bit bigger, isn't he?
Yeah,
Jalen
he's a
Walker's
little
like,
bit bigger.
Yeah.
yeah, I'd rather have.
I will say Williams is on the radar. He was one of the 30 visits for Dallas, and if you don't take him there at 12, he's certainly not going to be there at 44 in the second round. Now, you
No.
also have moving back, and we can discuss that a little bit here. I think the Cowboys would be receptive to moving back 3 to 4 spots, but I don't know beyond that if they're really looking to do that in this draft. And you have to have someone interested to move up. Although I will say, the word now is that Atlanta, who's at 15, would be interested in moving up. And if that's the case, I'm sure Dallas is on the phone with Atlanta, because to me, 15 is probably about as far back as they want to move or would be
Yeah, I
willing
would
to
guess
move
so.
and still think they could spin out of it.
So let me ask you this question then, David. We've and I think everybody believes that wide receiver is besides running back, is their biggest need. The difference being that there are a lot of running backs in this draft, and if Ashton Jenney won't be available at 12 either, and if he's not available, I wouldn't draft a running back in the first round, just because you can get one later. It's different at wide receiver because there's not that many quality receivers in this draft. Probably about 4.
Yeah,
that
after
could
you hear the
probably
top
step
4,
in.
you don't really hear much. I mean, the Dallas could come out of this draft with a starting running back that they take in the second or third round. I don't think you can make that same claim about a receiver.
So that makes it a really interesting issue for me, because I really think that just based on their needs, that the need is greater at cornerback than it is at wide receiver. But you could probably find a cornerback maybe in the second round that could step in, and certainly that's Will McClay's track record, right?
Yeah.
He has found cornerbacks in later rounds who stepped in, like Deron Bland did, right?
Well, Diggs was
And
second. Ron Bland was a
second-round pick.
fifth. You know?
Right. So, but they have not done that with wide receivers.
No.
That is the one area they've really not improved outside the first round. So it does kind of, to me, point toward them probably taking a wide receiver with that first pick. Don't you think?
Well, I think it's
Kevin, let me
also
ask you a question.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Evan.
You've seen these guys more than anybody else, but if Golden and Barron are both sitting there when the Cowboys pick at 12 and they don't move down, which is the better player?
I think personally that Barron's the better player. What I like about Barron is that he is, he's very versatile. He can play inside, he can play outside, he can play a little bit of safety. He did all those things at Texas and did them all well. And when they moved him around, he didn't say, "Hey, I don't want to do this." He was fine with all of that. He's very smart. He is very productive. He got 5 interceptions this last year. There are a lot of people that think he's past, that Travis Hunter is the number 1 cornerback, and then he's number 2. And besides all that, I think he's a really good teammate. Every time you would go to a press conference after the game, he would talk about his teammates in the secondary. He would talk about how well they played, and he would talk about other people on the team. He never talked about himself. And you could tell he's just really smart. I think a player like that upgrades the team across the board. When you add players like that, that's why I like Gilmore, is that they're not just good at their position. They're good for everything. They're good for the locker room. They're good for their teammates on the field. I think they give them a feeling on the field that this guy is in command, in charge back there, and we're going to be good. Now, having said all that, Matthew Golden also seems to be a really good, smart player as well. And the thing that struck me about him for Texas this year was that, when you watched him, it wasn't like Xavier Worthy, who would just be blowing past people, right? And Xavier Worthy was the fastest guy at the combine when he came out. His speed was obvious. It wasn't so much the case with Matthew Golden. He surprised everybody with that 4.29 time, right, at the combine. And
maybe he just looked slow next to Worthy.
Well, maybe that's
a relative
exactly.
thing,
But the thing about him was that he always was making tough catches, made tough catches, runs good routes. And for a guy who's really fast, that's kind of a rare thing. Most of the time when you get a guy that's really fast, he's just good for that one thing, right? He gets open, he makes the, it's kind of like Terrell Owens. He gets open, he makes the catch, and he runs away, and that's it. This was a guy that was very dependable for Quinn Ewers. Isaiah Bond was supposed to be their lead receiver at Texas. He got hurt a lot and never really kind of kept any momentum going. And Matthew Golden assumed that role for them. So I think that Matthew Golden would also be perfect for the Cowboys offense this year, because they don't have that kind of speed receiver, and that he does have the ability as well to make a tough catch.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you're talking about, kind of the target landing on receiver for more consideration. I don't think it's just because of the fact that you have a smaller, less depth at the top, and if you're going to move, you need to move on it quickly. I think the way this draft breaks, and this is rare in recent years, I think there's a good chance you don't see the first receiver come off of the board until 10, 11, 12. And that's right where the Cowboys are. So if you're sitting there at 12 and you have the chance to take the top receiver in the draft, as close as you can get to a consensus top receiver in the draft, that's a pretty good position to be in when it also happens to fill a position of need for you. So I think that's why so much of the focus at this stage going in has been on that wide receiver. Now, again, that can change very quickly. I'll go back to 2021, where the Cowboys were at number 10, and they were adamant, and all of their discussion was, okay, we're coming out of the first round with a corner. We need a corner here. We're fine with Patrick Surtain. We're fine with Horn, J.C. Horn. Either one of those two is likely, will probably get to us at 10. We'll just take whoever's there and keep moving. Well, Surtain and Horn went 8, 9. So now suddenly the Cowboys were, okay, we don't have another corner to take here. It doesn't make sense. Let's move back a couple of spots. And they wound up with Micah Parsons, a pass rushing linebacker who they had no intentions of taking in the draft that year, that high. Third day, you would take a flyer on a guy, but not the first 2 days. So But all of that being said, the way this draft lays out, I find it very hard to believe that McMillan and Golden would both be gone at 12. I think at least one of those two guys are there. I think they like both of them a lot. They're both different. McMillan's a taller, a taller guy. Doesn't have the speed that Golden does. Speed is always an asset. Every team looks for speed. That gives Golden the edge there. But McMillan's a guy who really understands the position, uses his body well, makes a lot of contested catches, is taller, which is something that the Cowboys don't have. Um, it's kind of wouldn't compare him to Des Bryant by any means, but as far as being able to track the ball and grab it at its apex, he's very good at that, just like Des Bryant was. Now he's not as physical as Des Bryant, so again, I'm not making that comparison, but just from a size and a contested catch ability, that kind of sets him apart. So I think Dallas would be very well served by either one. And while we focus on those two, I'm not so sure that Luther Burden isn't in that conversation pretty close. I think the only thing you hear about Burden is, well, you would like to see him do it in practice every day, but when he gets to the games, the guy clearly has a flair for making plays, and so we'll see. I think he's the third out of those three, but I think he's still at least partially in that conversation for Dallas there. Probably more if they move back, to 15, 16 in that range. But I don't know that there's that much separation in Burden either from those other two guys.
Said there were two things that came out of that press conference yesterday that were telling to me. One was when Brian Schottenheimer said that he relies more on film than testing, which I
Yes.
think is really good. I think that's a good thing. And also when Will McClay said that I want to find a guy who loves football,
Mhm.
and just what you said about Luther Burden would indicate maybe he doesn't love football as much as some of these other guys do.
That's a big question,
Uh,
right? Because if you love it and you're passionate about it, you practice the way you play.
right.
Very few that some guys are skilled enough, especially in college, where they can conserve and practice and just save it for the game, and then they kind of fall into a pattern of being able to, perpetuating that. But guys who are truly passionate and love it, they can't help themselves but to pour themselves into it completely every opportunity they're on the field. And I know that sounds simplistic, but when you're spending this much money on a guy and the stakes are so high, those are things these teams weigh, and they don't dismiss them lightly. They really give that a weight in making these decisions.
Well, the thing about it is, if you approach practice that way, you'll get better. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just simply that. The more you love it, the more you want to pour into it. If you don't really love it that much, it's hard to want to get out there and work hard and make yourself better, right? So, I think those are very telling things. I'd have to say right now, I'm putting on our morning news probable picks. I'm going with Barron just because I like him. But I'm almost convinced they'll take a wide receiver with that first pick, and I wouldn't have a problem with that because I think you can probably find a defensive back in the second round, and they have proven they could do that. My guess is that they will go wide receiver, defensive back, running back in the first three rounds, and and if they come away with three starters, which they kind of almost have to, I don't know. The defensive back might be a question whether that's a starter or not, but that's going to be somebody who's going to have to play a lot. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I'd be a little surprised if Trayvon Diggs was ready to start the season. And this is where teams need to be careful because you can talk yourself out of players. You can look at corner and go, well, look, we'll have Bland and Diggs together. Both of these guys have led the leagues in interceptions. We just got a first round pick from Buffalo. We can get a guy in here that doesn't have to step in right away and play because of that. But what if Diggs is not the player he was before these two major injuries in 2 consecutive years? I know he's young, but again, we're talking about a guy who his rehab habits have been questioned coming off the first rehab. Is he going to be more committed coming off the second one? And is that going to make a difference? Now, I thought when he came back, he still played well coming back off that first injury this past year. Um, we were just talking about a burden. Maybe Diggs is a little bit like that too. Not the greatest practice player, but certainly performs in the games. And, you have to be careful on that too, because another guy, especially early in his career, who wasn't a great practice player was Dak Prescott. Now, was it because he didn't have passion for the sport or he didn't care? No, it was because he was stretching and doing the things he didn't do well in practice to improve in those areas and didn't always look good. And that's an element we haven't talked about with some of these guys. As far as their passion is, it's not always about playing with passion and working harder. It's about working smarter. And what you see with a lot of guys who are alphas and at the top of their position, they never like to look bad in front of their peers. If you never like to look bad, you don't do the things in practice that make you look bad, right? where it's supposed to be a safe setting to not look good and improve and get better. But some guys can't get past that, and so they don't really work on their weaknesses as much as they do reinforcing their strengths. And so I'm just bringing that up because that's another thing that these coaches in a very short period of time have to discern about a young player and just see where they are and how they'll fit in.
Well, let me just say one last thing here before we get out of the Cowboys segment of the podcast, that when Will McClay has drafted inside the top 20 picks, he's made 5 picks inside the top 20. The only questionable pick would have been Leighton Vander Esch at 19, and that only because they knew he had a neck problem, and that neck problem eventually led to the end of his career. But the other guys were all pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Micah Parsons, not much. CD Lamb.
Those back-to-back years really put Dallas on a. And again, these are two guys who are part of their future. That one has been signed long-term, the other is about to be signed to a long-term deal. So
so he's been very good when he's been inside the top 20. So I have confidence that that Will make a good pick here.
Well, here's another one for you. Since 2010, on Cowboys' first-round picks, their first-round picks have a combined 40 Pro Bowl appearances. Second in that stretch is Pittsburgh at 32.
Yeah.
So especially when and again, I know we need to move on. Here's the other point to make. And, I think we've criticized the Cowboys the past couple of years in the draft, or certainly questioned, well, look, you knew there was going to be a run at running back in the third round. Why didn't you jump in and get ahead of it, before you picked in the fourth and all this stuff and some other positions? When you're in the top third of the draft in every round, like Dallas is, you can dictate when the run starts. When you're in the bottom third of a round, every round, as the Cowboys have been in the last 3 years, you're subjected to those runs and have to react to them. You have to be reactive rather than proactive. Dallas is in a position to be proactive, being in the top 12 picks of all of these rounds, to where they can say, okay, we're going to start the run on corner here. We're going to start the run at running back here. You don't have to be, oh, wait, we only have one running back here or 2 running backs, and they're gone, so let's wait another round. They're in a completely different position in this draft.
Well, there you go. All right, that'll do it for the Cowboys segment of our podcast. We're going to move over now and talk about the Rangers, who are out in Sacramento, which sounds like such a weird thing to say. That's where the A's play now.
That is so odd. I still can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. Evan does not make that swing out there. He does not. Whether it's Oakland, Sacramento, he does not go. He makes Sean McFarland go.
You refuse to stop by the capital of California? Is that it? Walk by the State House?
Yes.
So
I have no Sacramento jokes. I respect and love the people of Sacramento.
But you never go. When was the last time you've been to Sacramento?
Was asked to stay home, basically, because I'm a terrible person. I don't know.
When was the last time you've been to Sacramento? I'm going to San Francisco
on the weekend.
Oh, you're going to San Francisco, but not Sacramento? You understand they're like an hour and 45 minutes apart.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so Evan doesn't go, and what happens? Corey Seager gets hurt again, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first of all, let's talk about what the Bruce Bochy did, which, I don't know, Evan, what your emails and Twitter feed looks like, but I get a lot of people saying, why didn't he just change the lineup? Why don't we do something different? Well, he did that. He did shake up the lineup on Tuesday night, and it looked a lot different this year. Evan, you want to break that down?
Well, I think there were several things going on. One, there were wholesale changes, and the biggest of them, I think, was moving Marcus Semien out of the leadoff spot, moving him down to fifth, and then there were a cascade of other moves that followed. But I think that the Semien move spoke most highly of what the Rangers' issues have been, and that's that they're swinging at too many pitches, they're not taking pitches, and they're not walking. And first inning on Tuesday night, Josh Smith steps into the leadoff spot, works a full count walk. What happens? The Rangers score 2 runs in the first inning. It's only the third time this year they've had a multi-run inning, and it kind of set the stage for the entire night. What they did at the top of the order, and of course this lasted for all of 6.5 innings, I believe, yesterday, was stack their on-base guys. It was Smith, Wyatt Langford, and Corey Seager in the first 3 spots. And the idea would be, if you get those guys on base in the first inning, or get them on base as the game progresses, then the guys who are swinging big and are swinging often have more chance to get fastballs and drive them. And I don't know if you can really take the fact that the Rangers scored 8 runs, and it was a season high last night, and they built it out a ton of home runs. I don't know if you can take that and make that an accurate assessment that this is the way to go. Because look, Sacramento is a minor league ballpark. The ball carries there. And so I don't know if that's the most accurate of evaluations, but you certainly can't argue with the immediate results. You got what you were hoping for, which was guys on base early and power late. You saw Jake Berger homer. We saw Semien homer. Those were the kinds of things that this club, would like to see those guys do. So I think it was, if Bochy had waited until the end of April, I could have lived with that. If he made the changes going into Sacramento, I think that's fine. But I think they made changes that they needed to make. And the other change here that I think is probably the most permanent of all of these is that he's taken Leody Taveras out of center field, and he played Josh Smith in center field yesterday, played Dustin Harris there Sunday. And I think what we are seeing right now is the transitioning away from Leody Taveras as an everyday player.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Evan. But one of the things that you and I had talked about earlier this week was that I gotta say I haven't said anything about him publicly, but Josh Smith has kind of just been a revelation to me. Before last year, I just thought this is a guy with zero pop. He's not even really hitting the ball that well. He's a nice fielder and he can play several positions, but that's really all he's got going for him. Well, last year he did something. I don't know, but he's got a lot more pop than he used to have, and now he's hitting the ball. I mean, he's probably the most, other than Seager, the most reliable hitter on the team.
Well, he's taking the best at bats. He and Langford and Seager, those are the 3, quote unquote. The Rangers lineup is built to slug, Kevin, right? And there's a ton of sluggers in this lineup. Sluggers are inconsistent. They can slump, and that's what we saw this lineup. The 3 hitters in this lineup are Seager, Langford, and Smith. And yeah, Josh has built himself into that. I mean, he finds ways to get on base, and that's what you got to have at the top of the order. I don't think this was in one of the real considerations going into spring training, because I thought the Rangers thought that their leadoff alternative would be Evan Carter, but we've seen that kind of go, out the door at this point.
Yeah, because here's the thing to me, Evan, and I haven't really thought about that until just now, but especially so the Rangers have finally signed on to running, right? To trying to steal bases, a year late, probably in my mind, because of the rule changes in baseball and how many times you can throw over and all that kind of thing. If you've got a guy with
they've been slower on the uptake there, yeah.
no question. And so if you've got guys who are fast and good base runners, like, Leote's fast, but was not a good base runner. He actually gotten better this year, but he's just not
That's the
killing the
one thing he
base.
was really doing well, right? He was
Yeah,
being much more aggressive on the bases.
he was, but looks like a double now, right? I mean, it's hard when a guy gets on now. It's hard to hold him on first base, and so I think that look. And how many great hitters are there? There aren't very many great hitters anymore. It's that either a guy's a slugger or that's all you get out of hitters anymore. There's not a lot of guys hitting 300, and so it's hard to find that. But to me, it would really behoove the Rangers if they could come up with another guy, one or two guys who can have the kind of at bats that Josh Smith does, where he is drawing walks, where he is taking pitches. Because the problem for me when Marcus and Corey are at the top of the lineup is that neither one of those guys is taking very many pitches. Corey will swing at that first pitch. Now he's fine. I'm fine with him doing that, right? I mean, because he's really good at it. But there are lots of times when a pitcher could get out of the first inning against the Rangers and throw 8 pitches.
Yeah.
And that's not productive. You really do have to get something out of that leadoff guy where he is working the count a little bit, where he is showing the people in his dugout what this pitcher has and what he's willing to do.
No, to that point, Kevin, I mean, these were stats going into last night. The Rangers were first in the league in swing percentage. They had swung at the most pitches in baseball. They were last in walk percentage, so they were not taking pitches. And they were 29th of 30 in pitches per plate appearance, so they weren't taking long at bats. And look, what you do when you do that is not only do you make it a little bit more difficult for yourself, but you make it easier for opponents because they're not having to go to the middle of their bullpen, the soft spot in their bullpen, where guys are more prone to make mistakes as often. And that what did we see last night? We saw Vito go out of the game fairly early. The A's had to go to the soft part of their bullpen, and the Rangers were able to tack on. And that is what this team needs to do. It can't just be we're going to attack fastballs. It's also got to be we've got to get the pitcher out of the game as quickly as possible so we can then go beat up and bully, the 12th guy on the staff.
Yeah. I don't know. Obviously Marcus wants to bat leadoff. He likes to score 100 runs. That's one of his goals every year. And he's the kind of player who's earned that right, to do that. I think they have probably, don't you think that they have more or less done that just because that's what Marcus wants? Don't you really think that, when Marcus is performing and when he's hitting, and he eventually will, then there's no argument with it because the production is there. But I do think that probably this club thinks that this is the best thing for it. Don't you?
No, I think at this point it is. And look, it's been since the start of last year, it's been over 800 at bats, and the numbers just aren't good. I think the on-base percentage in the leadoff spot was 298, and that's just not acceptable. And look, to Marcus's credit, he moved down the order. He had a good game last night. And maybe maybe he's not a leadoff guy at this point, but in this lineup, he can certainly serve a purpose because if he does get a fastball, he can get it in the air and hit it hard.
Yeah, no question about that. All right, let's move over to the bad news. Corey Seager on a single, pulled up, running to first base, bad hamstring. We have seen this movie before. He was supposed to have an MRI today, Wednesday, right? Has he had that yet?
Well, it's 8 o'clock out there in California as we're recording this. I don't know. I haven't got my GPS tracker on. We don't share location on our iPhones, but
Can't
I'm
believe
assuming
that.
he will have it early this morning. The Rangers will get it read. And listen, based on the way the Rangers have handled things this year, with Leiter going on the IL with the blister and Langford going on the IL with the oblique, even though they were considered short-term injuries. And to that point, Josh Young going on the IL 2 games into the season, I don't expect anything other than to hear that Corey Seager is going to be on the IL, whether it's for 10 days or 6 weeks. I can't answer that, but I think they're going to operate with caution here. And look, the one, to your point, Kevin, on Josh Smith, you never want to lose Corey Seager, but if the option is be cautious and make sure you've got Corey for the majority of the time, and you've got a guy to plug in at shortstop like Josh Smith, you feel more confident that you can get through the next 10 days or whatever it is. So, yeah, I think that's probably what ends up happening. I think this leads into the next question, which is, what's up with all the shots? What's up with all those soft tissue injuries that Corey Seager has? And that's something we're going to have to dig into a little bit. This is the third hamstring injury he's had in the last 6 years. I don't know if because he's a tall guy and because he's he's not stocky at all, but he's got a significant lower half. I don't know if that contributes to it. On top of that, he's had the two what amount to groin tears, which is what a sports hernia basically is. He's had them on both sides. So I don't know if that's a product of him being a tall shortstop or if that's from the swings that he takes, but it is a little bit concerning that this guy's had that many soft tissue injuries.
It's a good thing Nico Harrison isn't the GM of the Rangers, because he would have traded him by now.
Yeah, it's not been a good week for Nicos in sports is one thing I've realized.
Yeah, that Tennessee quarterback, that didn't go so well for him. Nico's not doing too well. We're not ready to talk about the Mavericks just yet. Let's talk a little bit more about this thing with Seager. It is concerning, obviously, when he is on the field and when he is hitting. He made that adjustment in his stance. Opened it up some, and it's just remarkable that the way he self-diagnoses. Now, I know he has his own hitting coach that he works with and he talks to every day. But he came out, he started off slow, and then he did that, then boom, it's just like he's, one of the 2 or 3 best hitters in baseball. And, but he's just had a hard time remaining healthy with the Rangers. He was an MVP candidate last year, even, after missing all that time. It's just remarkable that he's able to put together the numbers he does when he's healthy. It's a little bit, not a little bit, but it's somewhat like Jacob deGrom, who is maybe the best pitcher in baseball when he's healthy. He just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, he's missed a half a season over the past 2 years due to injuries. That's a lot, and I mean, this is a guy, he did play 151 games his first year with the Rangers, but since 2018, that's the only time he's played over 135 games, period. Look, I mean, it's the same thing over and over, Kevin, right? No player is perfect. Even Aaron Judge has bad feet. So I think this is the flaw with Corey, is that he's susceptible to soft tissue injuries, and that's what the Rangers are going to have to manage. And I think for them in this situation, the fact that they've got a guy like Josh Smith sitting there on their roster, is a real asset for him, because it allows them to try and manage Corey to the best of their ability.
Well, he already had a calf problem too, right? That's kind of what he'd been kind of.
He had a calf problem coming into the season. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if that contributed to this,
That's entirely possible that it did contribute. We talk about this because you and I now, and David, even though David is old and kind of contemplating the next stages of life, he looks younger than both of us.
Well, that's true. But that's a Dorian Gray kind of thing. It's really creepy. Older, we don't want to talk about that.
We realize, right? You bang up your knee a little bit, and it ruins your gait, and it just leads to much more, a cascade of injuries there. And I think that's what the Rangers have seen with Seager.
Yeah, for sure.
My whole body's a soft tissue, basically, right now.
Yeah. There's a lot of soft tissue on us. That's the thing. That's the difference. All right, that's going to do it for our.
As Johnny Oates used to say, "I never pulled a fat."
I never knew that Johnny was that clever. He was never that clever around me. But anyway,
he had occasional.
All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment. We're going to move over and talk about the Mavericks, who wrapped up their season. And my gosh, I don't know what everybody was complaining about. We've talked to Nico Harrison twice in the last week. Well, not all of us,
Well, not all of yeah.
Yeah, there was an invitation only press conference, which I didn't make, which is not unusual for me not to be invited to something. So not even dinner half the time. But they did have a press conference on Monday in which Nico answered a lot of the same questions that he answered at that weird roundtable they'd had the week before, and probably was a little more contrite in this meeting. The one quote that kind of stuck to him was the one where he said, I did realize what Luka meant to this fan base, but not quite to the level that it is, which, once again, a bad answer. It's almost like this organization can't help itself. They just keep shooting themselves in the foot time after time after time.
Well, it's a bad answer, but it's a bad answer only because it's come so late. I mean, to me, acknowledging that he made a mistake or mistakenly evaluated Luka's place with the fan base was something that needed to be said much earlier, and he has either dodged the question or denied it for most of the past 3 months. And it was a no-win situation for Nico yesterday, unless he basically or Monday, unless he came out and said, I resign. I don't know how you win if you resign, but it's a bad answer, but it was the answer that needed to be said at that point.
Yeah, and the issue is we've talked about here is like there is no good explanation for what happened and what you got in return. You cannot explain it away. It doesn't matter if you fall on your sword. That's still not going to appease people because it just doesn't make sense. There is nothing you can say to rationalize this deal. And even when he said that the other day, he still can't help himself because it's still, he found a way to work in that, like, well, look, I still believe that if this team had been healthy and you could have seen what it was together, that would have mitigated the outrage to trading Luka. And you're going to see that next year. We're going to be a championship contending team. That's all he has to fall back on. But now you're falling back on that with two guys who have missed a large number of games combined over these last 5 years, and both of them need to be healthy for you to get to where you need to go. Because look at these playoff games, and I love PJ Washington. I think he's a very good fit on the team. You saw what he did in the playoffs last year, but when he's one of your top two guys, you're not going to go too far. And he had to be because of because of Irving being out, and he didn't respond in this game. Don't want to make too much of it. Every player has a bad game, but the players who were brought in here who did so well in their roles, they were brought in to supplement and complement Luka Doncic, who is no longer here.
Defense may win championships, but I can tell you one thing that doesn't win championships is complementary players.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, it's great to be a complimentary player, but now that you don't have the supreme talent at the top, complementary players have to do more, and that's where those players individually and the team overall gets in trouble because they have to overreach beyond what their skill set is.
Yeah, the problem for me in all of this and trying to figure this all out is that, first of all, we just have no exposure to Nico, and we had no history with Nico, right? He'd worked for Nike for 20 years. And so no one had any idea who he was when he came in. And when he came in, he seemed like this very reticent, reclusive guy a nice guy, maybe in over his head. And I think that's what Mark Cuban thought he was hiring. I think that Mark Cuban thought, I've hired me another guy, just like Donnie Nelson. I could tell him what to do.
Got to manage day to day, but he's going to defer to me. And
he's going to defer to me because that's what he said at the first press conference. Because when the question was asked, who's making the final call, Nico didn't even get to answer. Mark butt in and said, I'm going to be making the final call, right, Nico? And it's like, well, what ended up happening? Nico is the one who shoved Mark out the door, when he got the chance. So we got something here in this market that we weren't really counting on, and
A
that
heel
is
turn?
what's that?
A heel
A heel
turn?
turn.
A heel turn, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is that I call Nico Harrison a true believer, and by that I mean it's not just a religious thing. It is when someone to me is a true believer. When they believe in something, they are dead set on that. They are not wavering, and that is what Nico is. He believes that my way or the highway. This is even at that press conference twice. Once to one of the question I asked, and once to a question to someone else. He said, "When you make a deal, to make that deal, we jumped at the chance." And the way that he said jumped at the chance told me he still believes that he would do that today. He would jump at the chance to get Anthony Davis because he believes so strongly in Davis. And when we
He
talk
said he
about the
targeted him. Yeah.
absolutely. And that was he said, if you don't believe Anthony Davis is a great two-way player like I was, then you're not going to like this trade, because that's the complaint that you brought up, Dave. They didn't get enough. They didn't get enough draft picks, whatever. Max Christie has turned out to be a nice player, but not anything better than all the role players they already have. So so the other thing about this that kind of gets goes unsaid, and it kind of makes a little bit of a liar out of Nico, is he keeps talking about defense wins championships. Well, how much defense does Kyrie Irving play? You know, no one ever talks about that. Everyone expects, Luka Doncic to play better defense, and of course he could, and he does on occasion play better defense. But Kyrie tries a little bit, but who's he going to stop? He can't stop anybody. And yet Nico worships Kyrie. When he got hurt, he released that ridiculous statement in which he compared him to Kobe Bryant, which is a ridiculous comparison to make. I mean, as great as Kyrie is, he's not Kobe Bryant. And there's no question about it. So what that tells me is that it's not about the whole defense thing. It's that Kyrie's my guy. Anthony Davis is my guy. These are guys that I have known since they were teenagers. I love these guys. He just didn't like Luka. He didn't have the kind of relationship with Luka that he wanted. Luka resisted things. Luka, wanted to do things his way. They couldn't get the medical staff to get Luka to do the things they wanted him to do. That's why he fired most of the medical staff. All of those things are indications.
Here's another quick aside.
Yes.
On the medical staff and Casey Smith, who is recognized throughout the league as one of the best trainers and has been for a long time. You mentioned Kobe Bryant, and we've talked about how close Nico and Kobe Bryant were.
Right.
And that is well documented. Both have talked about it, Kobe earlier and Nico still refer to it. Guess who adored and thought the world of Casey Smith? Kobe Bryant. When I was doing NBA, I was there in LA to talk to someone else, not even Kobe. Kobe saw I was there, ran across the court and stopped me just to tell me how much he loved Casey Smith, and to tell Casey he gave me a message to give to Casey, and just how all the guys on the team. I mean, went out of his way. I wasn't even talking to Kobe for anything. I mean, so that is very real. But who else did Kobe love and thought the world of? Luka Doncic. So it's bizarre to me. And this gets to, well, I'm the sheriff in town now. I'm going to run things my way. Clearly, Nico and Kobe Bryant had a strong relationship and the ultimate respect for each other. Kobe had the ultimate respect for Casey Smith and Luka Doncic, but Nico doesn't. So, it's just, it's very, the dismantling that has taken place here is really, it's not hard to get your arms around because it's clearly happened, but
yes.
It's still a little baffling. It's just something that didn't need to happen.
Well, it would have been easy enough for Nico to come in here and that was the question I asked him, was that at what point did you decide that you needed to trade Luka Doncic? I mean, that didn't happen overnight. You had obviously been thinking about this for a long time. Well, he made it sound like he just said, well, it might not have happened at all. It just kind of became available and the Lakers were doing this. I don't believe that. I think he initiated the talks.
No.
I don't believe that the Lakers came to him, that Rob Pelinka said, "Hey, how about you trade me, Luka Doncic?" I think that Nico approached him with the deal.
To me, all this talk about, well, we didn't even know if Luka was going to sign the Supermax, which Luka and his representation have said from the start, of course we were going to sign the Super. There was never any sign that Luka was going to threaten the organization and not sign the Supermax. The fact that Nico continues to bring it up means in his mind, he felt they had to get ahead of that and do that. And he's using it as a rationalization for moving on versus any tangible threat that it was going to happen.
I think it's important here that we all listen to the sage voice of Charles Barkley, who said last night that he loves Nico, considers him a friend. Stop doing press conferences and take the L. There is no, and look, that's the bottom line. David, you summed this up at the very outset of this when you said there's no explanation. We have spent the last 3 months on this podcast basically revisiting this trade, trying to come up with anything that merits a logical explanation,
so
and there isn't one. And that's why that's why I've labeled this professional malfeasance, professional malpractice, whatever you want to call it. There's no explanation for it. And it's time for Nico to, and look, people want Nico to keep talking about this.
Too. This has a tremendous impact on the bottom line of the franchise.
Oh, absolutely. Listen,
who took over? Who had the most jersey sales this past year in the NBA? Oh, he doesn't play here anymore. He plays in LA. I mean, just the national TV appearances, the auxiliary money that comes in from having a transcendent player, all gone. The excitement.
Well, Kevin mentioned that in the column this week, right? That now the Dumont and Adelson group is going to start to feel it in the purse and in the pocketbook a little bit more when next year comes around and ticket sales go down and merchandise sales go down and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is, I have people who still, they're conspiracy theory people out there, and they want to believe that Dumont ordered him to do this. Listen, the Dumont and Adelson, they don't know anything about basketball, and they don't make any pretense that they know anything about basketball. That's why they were happy that Nico be in charge. He seemed like he was in charge, and they let him do what he wanted to do. And this is what Nico wanted to do. This clearly is just an example of a guy who, as I said, a true believer, thought this was going to be fine. This will work out. The fans will get over it. Once we win, they'll be over it. They'll be fine. That's what a true believer thinks. He thinks that there's no thing coming in from the outside saying maybe I shouldn't do this because the fans, this will really be hard for the fans to take. And I don't know that I want a general manager who's going to worry too much about what the fans think, frankly. If you're doing what's best for the franchise, but trading a 25-year-old superstar, that just doesn't happen. No one does. That's what Rob Pelinka even said that when they got him from the Lakers, when they introduced, he said the opportunity to get a 25-year-old superstar, it was like, he said, hey, Nico, let's make this deal. Then after he makes the deal, it's like, look at that. Look what I did. I took away, the guy who was going to be the best player in the history of your franchise, with all apologies to Dirk Nowitzki. And I gave you a 31-year-old guy who's hurt just as much as he is. And I threw in a little change with the deal. So,
and now you're betting on 230. Kyrie's 33. He's going to be 34 before the end of next season. So you're betting on two mid-30 somethings with injury
coming off a major injury
as your anchors, right?
Well, and then Klay Thompson, is your third offensive option at the moment. So, and then Kyrie doesn't get back.
Irving comes back in January. Yeah. How are they going to manage his minutes? Now again, there's a time to get ready into playoff shape. I get it, but they're going to manage his minutes. They're going to give him games off. And where are you going to be in the standings once your team is fully assembled? And how much more difficult of a road is it going to be, especially in the West? So yeah, there's a lot.
I'm going to throw one more wrench in this whole thing, and I don't know this. I'm just guessing this, but look, let's look at some things as well. Nico made the trade also for Quentin Grimes, right? Or acquired Quentin Grimes, and obviously acquired him for a reason. Well, he was going into the last year of his contract, and so he wanted a new one. They weren't able to get a deal done with him. He wanted to wait. He was betting on himself after this season. And all of a sudden Nico just said no. And so then he traded him for Caleb Martin, a guy who can't even get on the floor anymore. And meanwhile, Quentin Grimes goes to Philadelphia, and he's their leading scorer. Now, he's the leading scorer on a team going nowhere, and we know what that kind of thing means. But I will say this. If you had Quentin Grimes going into next season, knowing that he could do that and he could fill in as a scorer in the backcourt while Kyrie Irving is out,
Kyrie Irving, yes, exactly.
You'd feel a lot better, wouldn't you? I mean, there was nothing I saw from Quentin Grimes that I didn't think this season, wow, this was a good acquisition. This guy's a nice player, you know?
When you already have Davis, Gafford, and Lively as your 3-man rotation up front, do you need another big guy, or do you need to balance it in
absolutely.
the perimeter?
To me, I got to tell you, David, they can say what they want to about Caleb Martin. He's been good at times in his career, you know, and he had a good playoff run and all that kind of thing. I think that felt like the my way or the highway. You don't want to sign with us, you're out of here, you know. And so I think that that's the image I'm getting of Nico Harrison as a GM. It is completely different from the guy that I thought that they were getting, and I think it's completely different from the guy that Mark Cuban thought he was getting. And this has been an education for everybody. I do think, just as we wrap this up, that you know you've got, having said all that about him, you got to give him a chance to see how this works out, right? You got to see, you know, Davis on the floor. You got to see him with Kyrie on the floor. You know, that's the only fair thing here in all of this, is to see if it plays. I think once it gets on the floor, it's not going to do much. I think they can be very good. We'll see what happens. But I do think if this drumbeat of the fans keeps up, I think if Luka plays well and the Lakers do well, I think it won't let up. And at some point, you know, Patrick Dumont, he backed Nico up to now, but he didn't hire him. You know, he's not no obligation to him. At that point, don't you just look around and say, man, this has just been too much. Let's just get rid of the guy. The cloud that's hanging over the franchise at least will dissipate somewhat if I do that and bring somebody in new here, and we can all just sweep that aside.
Well, the only thing good that can happen for the Mavericks right now is for the Lakers to go out in the first round.
Yes.
And if the Lakers did get to the conference finals, say, they have a lot of work to do too. I just don't know that they have enough players to even get to the conference finals. But I don't. There's no way they're getting past Oklahoma City and maybe a couple other teams in the West. But if they got to the conference finals, and we're talking about Luka, and if they get the conference finals, that means Luka's going to have about 4 games of 40 or more here over these next 6 weeks that people are going to be
certainly capable of that.
It's just like rubbing salt in the wound, right?
Yeah. One other thing too about that is that if Luka gets to the conference finals or not, right? Whenever this Lakers season ends, the Lakers are going to go to work trying to build their team out around Luka Doncic.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's somebody else's deal now. And that's the thing that is just, you know, it is. I don't want to overstate this kind of thing, but it is one of those realities that you have. It's like when someone that you love dies and they're gone, and the realization of that they're gone. That's it. You know, I can remember when I was 22 years old when my father died, and the realization that was it, and he was gone, and I would never see him again, was overwhelming. You know, when you think about that. And then with fans, it's a little bit of the same thing. When a 25-year-old guy is gone and he's never coming back, that's it. He has gone to the Lakers, a team in your conference, and that is one of your rivals, and that you'll just have to watch him play the rest of his Hall of Fame career for somebody else, where he will be remembered as a Laker, not as a Maverick. If he stays with the Lakers for the next 10 years, that's what people will remember him as a Laker, not as a Maverick. That's a pretty hard pill to swallow. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for coming in. We hope that you'll be back with us next week when we'll talk about how the Cowboys did in the draft and maybe a few other things that pop up, and maybe we'll know a little bit more about Corey Seager's situation. Until then, thanks for coming, and from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.